February 22nd, 1981 dawned a cold and cloudy morning in Tokyo, Japan. And yet, a large throng of people had begun to form around the east exit to Shinjuku Station. It was not a political rally, as such public demonstrations had been banned in Shinjuku since the 1960s, and it certainly wasn't people on their commute as it was Sunday. It was a promotional event for a film called Mobile Suit Gundam. Gundam had begun as an anime TV series and a failed one at that. Barely scraping by with unimpressive ratings when it first aired, its main sponsor, the toy company Clover, had cancelled it after believing the complex and overtly political storyline crafted by Maverick director Yoshiyuki Tomino had alienated young audiences, which resulted in lower than expected toy sales. And while it did finish its overall story within 43 episodes, cut short from its original 52 order, Gundam appeared to be condemned to the forgotten annals of anime history. However, once the show entered reruns in the summer of 1980, it saw a complete rebirth. The company Bandai made money hand over fist with 30-yen model kits based on the show's many war machines, pioneering the hobby we now know as Gunpla. Sunrise, the animation studio behind Gundam, knew they had to capitalize on this resurgence, so it was decided to recut the original TV series into 3 feature-length movies. Tomino, who would naturally be directing, was ready to usher forth this newfound fandom for his creation. In order to promote the film, premiering in 3 weeks at the time, a promotional event was arranged. The plan was to have an all-day event. It would kick off in the morning with a preview of the movie, followed by interviews attended solely by people with tickets they could only win in a postcard lottery. This would then lead over to a public event that would commence at noon with a speech by Tomino himself. All who attended the event would be given a special promotional poster. The event was to be called A Declaration of a New Anime Century. The promotional staff estimated that around 5,000 people would attend, mostly children and a few hardcore young adult fans. They had prepared for this by having 10,000 posters printed. When the big day arrived, more people than expected were in attendance. Men and women of all ages, elementary, high school, and college level alike. The event had completely run out of posters by 10 a.m. By the time the morning event had ended, an estimated 20,000 people had gathered at the station. Police warned the organizers that the crowd had grown too large to control and that they were prepared to pull the plug in the interest of safety. At that moment, Tomino took the stage early and bellowed in the mic, "Everyone, take it easy." He then launched into an impromptu call for order and told everyone that they had gathered all 20,000 people there to make a statement. To, in his words, make all the grown-ups wonder what so many young people wanted to say, and they had to be on their best behavior, for the entire perception of fandom was at stake. This is more than an event, it's a matsuri. I appreciate the passion that you brought here today, but you know what will happen if someone gets hurt? They'll say, "That's anime fans for you, just a bunch of idiots running wild." We need the grown-ups to wonder what this Gundam is all about. We need them to understand what young modern people, teenagers, are seriously thinking about, and grasp that by seeing Gundam for themselves, even once. At first, Tomino questioned if the masses even heard him. He second-guessed the effectiveness of his microphone, and his speech had been completely off the cuff. Plus, he was pushing 40 at the time. Being one of those grown-ups he was railing against could have made his words ring hollow. But then, a calm swept over the crowd. The mass of people, some of whom were dressed as their favorite characters from the Gundam anime, stood in rapt attention toward its creator. They took a step back and began to listen. From that point onward, a parade of the series' architects followed. Animators came on stage and interacted with the crowd they held in the palm of their collective hands. Singer Takachin Yashiki sang the film's closing theme, Cross of Sands, and more importantly, voice actors invited a select lucky few cosplayers on stage to perform some of the anime's most famous scenes. The event would close with the invitation of 2 other cosplayers on stage. Cosplayers who would end up being future Gundam animator Mamoru Nagano and future voice actress Maria Kawamura. There, in front of a crowd of thousands, they delivered the declaration of a new anime century, stating, "We the assembled have gathered here to declare the start of a new era. Our era. A new anime century." Indeed, it was. The declaration of a new anime century has gone down in history as anime's Woodstock. a massive coming out party for TV anime and its surrounding culture, showing that it was not merely a tool to sell toys to children and fill up airtime, but to tell stories that resonate with large audiences that went beyond the children's demographic. It had been 18 years since the premiere of Astro Boy, and TV anime had now come of age. But more importantly, it introduced the general public of Japan to a new emerging subculture. A subculture marked by obsession and passion for things like anime, manga, sci-fi, fantasy, horror, guns, idol, gunpla, figures, toku, martial arts, pro wrestling, hentai, yuri, yaoi, cosplay, doujin, computers, stereo, video games, visual novels, and anything else in the same orbit. They would be known as Otakuzoku, or just simply, Otaku. Soon, otaku would enter the very same anime industry that defined them, shaping it from their own influence. And within 10 years after that fateful February day in 1981, one group of otaku animators would document their experience through anime.
やだね、オタクは。
京都ビデオ。
そしてアニメ関係のスペシャリストのこの僕と天才イラストレーター佐藤女子を加えれば10年後の業界は全て我々のものなのだ。
Japan, the spring of 1982. Ken Kubo lives a pretty ordinary life as a college student, devoting most of his time to tennis club and his girlfriend Yoshiko. All in all, he should be happy, and yet, he feels disconnected from everybody surrounding him. Even amongst his crowd of tennis club cohorts, he feels like an outsider. After leaving a bar crawl early, Kubo has a chance encounter with a group of strange people in an elevator, talking about shows and things he had never heard of.
それにしてもこの前のコミケすっごい人だったね。
ほんと素人ばっかし分かってないよな。なあ、いたミンキーモモのコスプレしてたあの子覚えてる？
Even stranger is that the group is led by an old high school friend of his, Tanaka. After this chance meeting, Kubo's life will never be the same again.
なんて気持ちいい若者じゃろう。口で出してるシベールはいいよ。これからの30分、あなたの目はあなたの体を離れてこの不思議な空間へと入っていくのです。
A few more encounters with Tanaka reveals that he is the leader of the Jack of All Trades Club, an organization of otaku on campus grounds. He introduces Kubo to his many friends, each of whom had their own special interests, and it's not long before until Kubo gets entangled and dragged down into the world of otaku. This might actually be the life Kubo has wanted all along, as being an otaku has ignited a passion in his soul that he has never felt before. With a fire burning in their hearts, Kubo and Tanaka decide that they will go beyond being mere otaku and become the absolute best of the best of otaku, the Otaking.
なってやろうじゃねえか。オタキングに。
1991's Otaku no Video is many things. Part slice-of-life semi-autobiographical comedy, part parodic mockumentary, part historical documents, Otaku no Video might actually be the first anime to really grapple with the fandom and culture that surrounds the medium. Many others have followed in its footsteps like Comic Party and Genshiken, but Otaku no Video feels like a special case. Because the only studio that could have done a project like this was Studio Gainax, built by otaku for otaku. All of its founders were of the same generation getting addressed by Tomino that fateful February day in 1981. They were on the ground floor of that entire subculture. No studio has ever been so uniquely qualified for a project. But Otaku no Video is such a one-of-a-kind product that its uniqueness makes it a very difficult anime to critique like you would any other film or TV show. It exists less to tell a story and more to paint a portrait of otakudom that extols as much as it skewers. For that reason, it captures the spirit of a point in time so well. History is not simply the study of the past, it is an explanation of the present. This includes the history of otaku culture. For this reason, Otaku no Video is the perfect historical document. In the 30 plus years since this was released, things have greatly changed, but some aspects remain the same as well, and this video aims to see which is which. The lesson begins now, Otakings and Otaqueens.
俺たちは二人ともオタクじゃないか。これからもオタクで生きていくんだ。
The word otaku began as a pronoun. In Japanese, it literally translates to the second person pronoun you. Specifically, it's a less direct version of referring to someone compared to the more intimate anata or the more masculine omae. As a result, it was a pronoun mostly associated with housewives addressing neighbors or strangers. The origin of the word as a fan of anime varies. Otaku historian Eiji Otsuka has theorized that the name originated via the way people met at conventions for the first time and conversed with each other with some level of comfortable distance. Others have said that the term actually goes as far back as the 1960s, where science fiction fans would use the pronoun when they were trading books, and it only got popularized when sci-fi author Motoko Arai used the term in an essay she published. But there are a select few that believe that the term really spread to prominence thanks to the work of the founders of the anime studio Gainax, specifically Toshio Okada. Born July 1st, 1957 in Osaka, Okada was a precocious child who could read and write from a young age, and had fully become immersed in the world of science fiction thanks to his father's endless fascination with UFOs and the occult. His father was also a fan of the sci-fi manga Babel 2, and had introduced his son into that world as well. Okada spent most of his youth voraciously reading sci-fi books, but it wouldn't be until 1974 when he had entered high school that he saw something that changed his life. It was the first airing of Leiji Matsumoto's space battleship Yamato. After witnessing this, Okada persuaded his father to buy him a U-matic videotape recorder, one of the first of its kind. Because he could only afford one 60-minute videotape, he would record episodes of Yamato, play it over and over again until he memorized it, and then overwrite it with the next set of episodes. 4 years later, Okada would enter the Osaka Electrocommunication University to study computers. There, he would fall in with the Kansai Student Science Fiction Research Association Federation. Rolls off the tongue, don't it? Thanks to a clerical error on his part, Okada didn't receive the credits for his first semester, which led to him dropping out after the end of his first year of school. But while he kept this fact from his parents as they sent him his monthly allowances, he was devoting his entire time to the club, making costumes, going to see the premiere of Star Wars, and, most importantly, going to some of Japan's earliest science fiction conventions. It was at one of these conventions, SetoCon, that he met Yasuhiro Takeda. Takeda was a kinky university student who was failing his nuclear engineering courses thanks to neglecting his studies in favor of his own sci-fi club. That's what led to the two of them becoming friends and getting into the wild animated world of convention organizing. In 1981, he and Takeda had a hand in organizing the 20th Nihon Sci-Fi Taikai in Osaka, where it was nicknamed Daikon 3, since it was the third time it was held there. It was there the two men commissioned a short 8mm film to be played exclusively at the con by some local students from their art school. They were Hideaki Anno, Hiroyuki Yamaga, and Takami Akai. But that's a story for another day. More importantly, Daikon 3 was where Okada got into selling garage kits. Garage kits are assembled models produced in limited supply through resin casting as opposed to mass-produced figures. Realizing there was an untapped demand for garage kits and other otaku swag that no other company was taking advantage of, Okada, along with Takeda, founded General Products, a store devoted entirely to selling science fiction and anime-based goods, one of the first of its kind. But thanks to a scandal involving him having an affair with a female co-worker, Toshio Okada decided to move operations for General Products up to Tokyo after Hiroyuki Yamaga extended an invitation for him, which worked for him since it allowed him to be more closer to the art school students, who were now operating under the name Daikon Film. Okada had been working on numerous projects for them. Like with the Daikon 3 animation, he had helped in the planning for the far more advanced short they did for Daikon 4. On top of that, he had written the script for Hideaki Anno's Ultraman fan film, Return of Ultraman. Around that same time, Yamaga was kicking around an idea for an anime concept known only as Royal Space Force. but he knew that studios would only buy a concept like this if Daikon Film was an established studio. And since Yasuhiro Takeda was managing General Products well enough on his own, Okada decided to focus all his efforts into the anime business. So, on Christmas Eve, 1984, Okada and his friends officially transformed Daikon Film into the studio Gainax. For the rest of the 80s, Okada played an instrumental part in Gainax's growth. He planned out the production of their first projects, the aforementioned Royal Space Force, and he pitched and wrote the story that would eventually become Gunbuster. He even got Gainax into the burgeoning PC games business with the incredibly racy Cybernetic High School, a quiz game where, for every right answer you would get, a cute anime girl will take off her clothes for you. But by the turn of the 90s, Okada was exhausted. After spending most of the decade with many an iron in the fire, alongside the birth of his daughter, he was ready to step back and be a family man. Before he could leave though, he had one last project in him that he desperately wanted to get out before he parted from Gainax. And that project was... At this point in their history, Gainax was no longer the scrappy little upstart studio founded by a group of nerds and a dream. They were an established studio with hit movies, OVAs, and a TV series under their belts. This is shown by how a slice of life comedy like Otaku no Video can look so rich in visuals. First, you have the character designs done by my guy Kenichi Sonoda. Sonoda's designs have that good exaggeration of characteristics that fit the tone of the anime while also having that realistic vibe. The otaku of this anime look like credible outcasts. Slightly scruffy, either overweight or underweight, dressed for comfort over style, but still having a friendly vibe to them to allow the audience to identify with them. You definitely get the feeling that Gainax really let Sonoda indulge himself when he designed the token female otaku, Yuri Sato. Short, petite little thing with big round glasses who spends most of her time wearing frumpy overalls, but is definitely unafraid to show a lot of skin. Yeah, over under how many drool stains are on her sete. Animation-wise, a lot of it does feel more down to earth than your usual Gainax animation, but when the visuals do pop, they stick in your mind way more. I have never seen cell paint look so luscious before. Most of the sakuga is through some of the anime's cromulent character acting, with characters making these wide, passionate gestures as they talk about their passions in a humorous yet infectious way. The most noteworthy animator on Otaku no Video is animation director Takeshi Honda. One of the first rookies Gainax enlisted in their cause, Honda's cuts burn the hottest out of all of them, showing his evolution as a young artist. From the opening intro he did with My Hero Maida, which lovingly parodies the anime OPs of yore, to the climax which renders the labor of animation into a beautiful moment of triumph. Call me a sucker for what I'm about to really applaud this anime for, but I do adore just how far it goes in immersing you into the otaku culture of the early 80s. It's a snapshot of otakudom at the dawn of their golden age. For one, there's the game changer of video recording that had become more widespread in nerd circles of this time, and they really show how it impacted otakudom.
Otaku NHK の少年ドラマシリーズ覚えてる？
ああ、覚えてる。毎週見てたよ。
もう一回見てみたいと思わない？
じゃーん、最終話まで揃ってるぜ。
They also covered the landscape with references and shoutouts to what otaku would be watching at the time, and I was taken back by their choice of deep cuts. I was expecting the Gundam references and the Lum cosplays, but having a scene where a poster for Ghost the Cellist is shown prominently was a real surprise. And of course, Gainax can't resist the temptation of self-referential backpatting.
それぞれがこだわって書いてるんだ。誰でもできるもんじゃない。
The references aren't just there for show or nostalgia though. I said at the beginning that Otaku no Video is a semi-autobiographical work, and that is true. The entire framework of the narrative is kind of based off of Otsuka's own life. Discovering anime, meeting up with like-minded fans of said anime, getting into the garage kit business, leaving the garage kit business, and capping it off with getting into the animation business. Tanaka's design is based on what Otsuka looked like at the time, and the house where the Jack-of-all-trades club hangs out in could be based off of the Gainax house where the animators lodged for most of the 80s. I say partially because I don't think the Gainax house was ever this clean based on witness testimony. Make no mistake, Gainax house was a den of rabid bachelors. Nobody cleaned or even straightened up. ever. When we received a visit from Hiroe Suga, who for a time was staying at a boarding house in Tokyo and working as an author, she was literally sickened by the smell. The color drained from her face and she beat a hasty retreat. Ultimately, we elected to move out of Gainax house. When the landlord came by to give the place a once-over and release us from our contract, he was stricken speechless. Almost immediately after we vacated, the house was demolished. Though, even taking the autobiographical elements into account, the events that take place in Otaku no Video are exaggerated to say the least. This is supposed to be a Horatian satire of fan culture after all. Kubo's descent into otakudom is treated even-handedly since the otakus writing this are very self-aware. After getting a crash course on the ins and outs of fandom, it's clear that this lifestyle fills some gap of his. He feels more content in life, and his soul is more alight with passion for all things otaku. But there's a clear downside. Otakus are social misfits in Japanese society. Probably less so today, but especially 40 years ago. The average normie seeing a bunch of nerds lined up for the midnight premiere of Nausicaa doesn't see a group of passionate fans, they see a bunch of losers wasting their time on cartoons.
漫画じゃないよ、アニメ。
ねえ、どっちだって一緒だよ。しかしみんな物好きだな。他に楽しみないの?
The way otaku present themselves don't exactly help their case either. While they are friendly, they do look and act like weirdos to the average person. These unshaven adults who traipse around downtown quoting Harlock and making Star Trek sound effects. It's why at the beginning, Kubo's meeting with the Jack-of-all-trades club gives you a creeping feeling that he is being lured to the dark side.
一回止まったらもう二度と抜け出すことはできないけどな。
And Kubo pays a massive social price for all of this indulgence. He completely gets ghosted and subsequently dumped by his cute normie girlfriend who really does not like that her boyfriend's idea of a good date night movie has gone from Kramer vs. Kramer to Unico and the Island of Magic.
それになんだか少しだらしなくなったんじゃない?
そうかな。
This is the impetus for Kubo's desire to become the Otaking. He wants to be the greatest of all otaku out of spite, to really stick it to those passionless normies who mock them.
アニメとか特撮好きなのが犯罪ってわけじゃないだろ。なんでそれだけで区別されるんだ。テニスやってるやつがよくて、アニメやってるやつはダメなのか。
He wants to craft the world in the Jack-of-all-trades club's image, a world where otaku like him can be otaku to their heart's content, a verdant Eden to the freaks and the geeks. From that point onward, Otaku no Video then becomes Kubo and Tanaka's rise, fall, and rise again as they try to conquer the world with otakudom, and ultimately succeed in the end. But still, that's just half of this anime. The other half isn't anime at all. There's a unique structure in how Otaku no Video presents its narrative. Taking place over the course of several years, each scene is presented as a snapshot of a certain part of a year over the passage of time, which is why characters' designs will sometimes go through drastic changes, like Tanaka chopping off his mullet when he's trying to enter the white-collar world, only to grow it back when he commits to going into the garage business with Kubo months later. And this passage of time is marked with title cards showing the date and important news events that happened around that time to better place the viewer in that period. These can range from the premiere of Miki Momo to the KAL-007 incident. But in between these segments, Otaku no Video stops being an anime and becomes a documentary. These segments, titled Portraits of an Otaku, interview real-life otaku, both former and practicing, and gives us an insight into the lifestyle. We get to see a former otaku reminisce about his days in the sci-fi clubs of old, a videotape collector conduct business over the phone, a gun otaku being interviewed in the field, a garage kit hobbyist crafting his work, a cell thief sharing some of his heist stories, and a gaijin otaku talk about his first exposure to Japanese anime. Once the interview is over, we get to see statistics that reflect the demographics and values of the larger otaku movement, showing similarities as well as vast differences between different fandoms and demographics. But what unites all of the interviewees is that they are all operating under some level of anonymity to protect the innocents. Pseudonyms, facial pixelations, even electronically modulating their voices.
僕だって普通の人間ですから まあコスプレくらいしたっていいじゃないですか。
And the reason for this is because this is all a fakearoo, a complete fabrication, a mockumentary. And when you come in with that knowledge, a lot of these interviews feel more like elaborate skits than actual interviews.
人殺しとかは本当したくはないし、あくまでゲームとして楽しんでるっていう感じですかね。
It's obvious, right? It's almost too perfect that the porn otaku they meet has invented a special pair of glasses that he swears allows him to bypass the pixelated genitals, or the salaryman who fervently denies his involvement with the otaku fandom and cosplay, only to pull a Char Aznabel helmet out from his desk and channel him through a speech.
それは人には話したくない過去だってあるんですよ。ほらほら、赤い彗星のシャースオさんも言ってるじゃないですか。認めたくないものなら自分自身の若さゆえの過ちというものを。
The interviewees operate under pseudonyms, but the actual names they are credited under are also pseudonyms. That's because people have pointed out that many of them are clearly the Gainax staff. Some have been hard confirmed for this. Gainax producer Hiroki Sato has gone on record in saying that he played the Garage Kid Otaku, and we know for a fact that the Gaijin Otaku is Craig York, a member of General Products' American branch who took his pseudonym from Gainax associates Sean Howell and Leia Hernandez. And even those who still have not been confirmed, you can make some educated guesses on who they're supposed to be. The gamer otaku, who is in love with a girl from a hentai video game, is not only coincidentally playing Gainax's cybernetic high school, but also happens to look coincidentally like a young Hideaki Anno. But while these interviews are fake through Gainax staffers and a little bit of improv, they do have some kernels of truth in them. Supposedly, the porn goggles guy was based off of a real guy Okada once knew who did exactly that. And the cell thief story are based off of real accounts from people who stole animation cells, often walking into the studio and just taking them because security was so lax in those days.
アニメーションの制作会社なんて24時間玄関開きっぱなしだし、おはようございますとか適当に言いながら入っていけばもうバッチリ。
Now I know what some of you are thinking. Why any of this? Doesn't this just break up the pacing of the overall story? And does knowing that these interviews are fake kinda make them completely pointless? For the first question, yes it does. For the second question, no they don't. The interview segments do get the audience up to speed on otaku and their relationship to Japanese society. While they are mostly there to provide some cheeky, self-effacing humor, they also provide much necessary context to the anime that non-otaku might miss. For example, in the Cell Thief interview, the animator mentions that cell thieves are considered an unsavory part of otakudom that even other otaku see as lowlives, supported by the thief being completely remorseless of his actions like a shifty drug dealer.
でもそのセルを盗品と分かってて買うやつがいるわけだし、それを宝物のように大切にしてるやつがいる。世の中それで成り立ってるんだからそれでいいじゃん。
So when we come back to the anime and see that Tanaka has become a cell thief after he and Kubo get forced out of their Garage Kid business, that symbolizes he has hit rock bottom to resort to such a disreputable occupation. But there's a bigger reason why the Portrait of an Otaku segments exist, and largely ties into the reason why this anime got made in the first place. On July 23rd, 1989, serial killer Tsutomu Miyazaki was arrested after a failed kidnapping of a little girl. He had already killed 4 children, all girls between the ages of 4 and 7. He murdered them before abusing and dismembering their corpses. The Miyazaki case would become the highest profile criminal case in Japan for the early 90s, not just for the sheer monstrousness of his crimes, but because what investigators in his home saw. 5,763 videotapes among videos and photos he took of his victims. Some of these videos included anime. That was enough justification for the media to dub Tsutomu Miyazaki the Otaku Killer. This set off a massive moral panic against otaku. What was initially seen as a mockable but ultimately harmless subculture was now seen as a threat against society. A group of infantilized, antisocial, and hyper-individualistic adults who are so alienated from reality that they immerse themselves into fantasy, and will soon lose the ability to tell which from which. And while some outlets did point to Miyazaki's poor family life and mental illness as probable cause, they preferred to link his involvement to otaku culture even though he had zero connection to any fan scenes. Police would harass doujin conventions and otaku-based businesses, often bringing their proprietors and participants in for questioning. Academics and social critics from across political spectrums analyzed the harmful effects of manga and how their playing around with no fixed identities, gender roles, and sexualities kept otaku from forming meaningful human relationships. The danger of a whole generation of youth who do not experience the most primary 2- or 3-way relationship between themselves and their mother and father, and who cannot make the transition from a fantasy world of videos and manga to reality, is now extreme. Otaku no Video was made in response to this panic, not just as a means to convince public opinion that otaku were in on the joke, but also to convince other otaku. According to Okada, otaku bashing amongst other otaku became popular around this time, and this anime was a means to put it in perspective. Okada is aware that normal people don't understand the passions of otaku, and that's okay. They are still passions at the end of the day that give you purpose in life. And sure, there may be unsavory elements to the subculture, but there are unsavory elements in every part of society. For that, we cannot judge the humble otaku for their love of anime, fan manga, and special effects films. After all, what if they monetize their hobby and make a bunch of people rich?
信じられん。わずか1年でここまでなれるとは。
That's definitely the feeling I gathered from the second half of Otaku no Video, justifying your hobby by showing how it benefits the capitalist machine. Kubo, Tanaka, and the rest of the club build a business empire on the back of garage kits and become filthy stinking rich in the process, implicitly endorsing the philosophy that one's value in society is determined by how much money they can generate. There does come a point where Kubo gets too greedy trying to outsource the business to China and subsequently pays for it when the bottom drops out of the garage kit market, leading to him and Tanaka being bought out by the wealthy businessman Yoshiko ran off with, showing that not only is a revenge best served cold, but also the pursuit of wealth can cause you to lose sight of your own passions that got you there in the first place. Of course, this kinda gets negated when Kubo, Tanaka, and their demure lady assistant Misuzu mount a massive comeback by getting into the anime industry, animating a short called Misty May, which, in World, is passionately described as the most cynical type of anime they could make to latch onto otaku wallets.
そうだ、少女ものにはつきもののキュートかつギャグメーカー、重要なコースターリングだ。名付けておじきんと
And it all works out in the end. They become titans of anime, Yoshiko leaves her executive husband after his business goes bust, and we cut to 1999 where Kubo and Tanaka celebrate the founding of Otaku Land, the ultimate expression for monetizing your hobby for capitalist gain. And by the way, I'm well aware of the irony of critiquing this while also monetizing my hobby, so don't bother pointing that out in the comments. Or do, I could use the engagements. And despite being a portrait of otaku in a certain era, it is no doubt held back by its own biases, namely the role of female otaku in this time period. While there was a disparity between the sexes, about 80% male to 20% female, female otaku or fujoshi were still an instrumental part of the early otaku subculture. They were the primary movers and shakers of the nascent doujin market in the 70s. Tomino credits female fans for laying the foundation for the entire Gundam fandom as they got into it from the story and not gunpla like most boys did. As a result, otaku were not immune to culture wars, even in its 80s golden age. There were male otaku who saw the presence of women and their inclination towards pretty boys and yaoi to be an existential threat. To see this in action, I recommend searching for 1985's The Book of Otaku Insects. A similar tongue-in-cheek parody to Otaku no Video, there's a marked difference in how male and female otaku stereotypes of this time are described. Whereas male insect descriptions read as far more good-natured ribbing, there's far more venom reserved for female insects, calling them out for crimes of being self-righteous, dumb bimbos, only in it for the money, or just plain not attractive. They do have a not all females disclaimer, but that's ass covering of the highest degree. The women of Otaku no Video aren't given as harsh treatments. The only questionable writing would be Yoshiko, who goes from confused girlfriend to antagonist over the course of the story, but she still gets off kinda easy in the end. The otaku girls, Yuri and Misuzu, just feel like your typical neutral females. I've seen Simpsons guest star characters with more depth. Yuri is portrayed as the dream token girl of every nerd friend group. Just one of the guys while still being cute and willing to cosplay in skimpy costumes. Misuzu, meanwhile, is just this soft-spoken decorous waif who's only defined by her artistic abilities that are given such comments as, "Wow, a cute girl can draw hot ladies like that?"
のキャラクターならどんなユーザーにも受け入れられることは間違いない。
一体誰のデザイン？
彼女よ。
まさか君のようなナウい女性がこんなデザインを。
We don't get any insight of what they like about being an otaku compared to the male cast. Yuri's only there to explain illustration and cosplay, while Misuzu is a barely developed rebound for Kubo. Comic Party was better at giving the female perspective of otakudom, and that was based off of an H game. I guess this has less to do with any inherent misogyny and more to do with time. That's why the plot point where Yoshiko looks like Lin Minmei from Macross doesn't go anywhere, and Kubo and Misuzu's budding romance being so undercooked that it might as well be in a butcher's window. We just had to have those mockumentary segments, didn't we? But regardless of any pro-capitalist sensibilities and underwritten female cast, Otaku no Video in a way did accomplish its goal in dreaming of a world conquered by otaku. After all, we're living in it right now. On September 1st, 1991, on the second day of the inaugural AnimeCon 91, the first episode of Otaku no Video had its premiere on 60mm to an awaiting audience of 9 people. Despite the small turnout, Gainax didn't mind too much as they were the co-sponsors of the convention and made money anyway. The impact of the OVA would not be truly felt until Robert Woodhead's Animego released the subtitled VHS on March 17, 1993. It was through that the word otaku was introduced to Americans, which soon became the go-to term for American fans of anime to refer to themselves as.
Call me Otakon.
Otakon?
It stands for Otaku Convention. An otaku's a guy like me who likes Japanimation.
And while there has been some discourse in recent years as to whether or not it's okay to refer to oneself as an otaku due to it being a loaded term in Japanese language, the real question we should be asking is, does it still matter? Because in today's world, almost anybody's an otaku. In recent years, anime and manga have actually outpaced their American counterparts considering almost half of Gen Z engages with them. And considering how much Demon Slayer costumes I've seen around Halloween, the number amongst Gen Alpha might be even higher. This is due to anime never being more accessible to Americans than it is now. It exists simultaneously on established linear TV channels and multiple streaming networks. At this point in time, we'll never want for more anime because we have so much of it at our fingertips. And this isn't just for Americans either. We live in a world where the final episode of Dragon Ball Super can be advertised like an association football game in Mexico and attract entire towns worth of crowds. And going beyond anime, nerd culture is no longer the realm of the outcast. It quite frankly has become culture itself. Even if a genre like superhero movies falters at the box office, there's a good chance another nerd genre can be waiting in the wings to take its place. Who's to say that anime movies might be one of those genres? As a self-proclaimed nerd, I find this to be something I can only charitably call a mixed blessing. Yeah, we got more people into the stuff that for years we've been gushing about, but there's always the worry that the love for this might not go beyond superficial consumption. Moreover, the demand for nerd-based media has only made things more difficult for the people who create that media as the studios seek to exploit them. Okada-san himself has been very outspoken about how the global demand for more anime has actually hurt the industry more than it has helped it. Otaku wanted people to respect their hobby and to appreciate the beauty in what they saw in the works they fixated on, but it turns out, Otakuland being built came at a cost. A deal with the devil known as capitalism. Companies like Netflix see the value of anime, but not as art, only content. Otaku no Video ends far into the future year of 2035. Half the world is underwater and Kubo and Tanaka, now old men, go to visit the underwater ruins of Otakuland. They enter a door and come out to a flight deck of a spaceship, their youth regained and their friends ready to launch off into the next adventure. They've conquered the world with otakudom, now they're taking their mission beyond the furthest stars.
目指すは宇宙 オタクの星を探すんだ。
As long as humanity exists, there will be anime, and by extension otaku. Hopefully, that means a better otaku world exists out there. A true otaku land cannot be built on the backs of the people exploited for their passions. It's gotta be made in a world where everyone values one's passions as much as their art equally. It has to be out there somewhere. There are still more worlds otakudom has to conquer. Thank you all for watching. If you like this video or want to support this channel, please donate to my Patreon. Each dollar can give you early access to my videos as they come out, as well as keep the channel running a bit more smoothly. You can also subscribe to the channel, ring that bell for notifications, or just like this video. Either way, you'll be helping me out. That's all for now. See you for the next round of tapes.